Joe, we can hear
All
you.
right, everybody. Welcome. If you don't know who I am, those of you on Zoom, I'm Joe Thompson. They say I'm the president of the chapter, whatever that means. But I'm just a regular guy like everybody else. All right. But welcome again to the February meeting of Houston SABR. All right. We are in the throes of spring training. Pitchers and catchers have reported. So it's a great time, right, to be alive? So hopefully you'll take the advice of Jose Altuve, who says he wants to be an Astro for life. Okay? You will be a SABR member for life. All right? So thank goodness for Altuve.
World champion.
I believe that would be the Houston Astros. Despite what they say online, I think the Atlanta Braves have the best chance of going to the World Series or something with some of the odds. I don't believe that. I don't believe that. I think we're the best. We have the best odds. Is anybody concerned about Lance McCullers' elbow? Is anybody concerned? Brownie, are you concerned?
I'm always concerned about LMJ.
Because they shut him down, right?
Day to day.
Dusty told us to chill. Dusty told us to chill. All right. Okay. Well, we have a lot of new members and guests. All right. I don't know if Astros Fan Fest had something to do with this. I'm hoping it did. But you know, the word is getting out. I'm going to go through this long list. Some of you are actually here. Jeffrey Firemeister, right? Yeah. Next to John Lloyd.
Yes.
Right. Adam Brody, not here. Hunter Clark. These are people that just joined this last month. I mean, this is according to Chris's meticulous record keeping. Evan Drellich. We know that name?
Absolutely.
No, it's right here. That's what Chris sent me. Unless he's trying to play a joke on it. Or unless he's just kind of trying to drum up some support for his new book. I don't know. It's that age. Sarah Gales, Ian Oliver, Cesar Sally Buttons. So, are you here, Cesar? No. Okay. Jessica Smythe. Is that the Jessica from SABR? I believe it is.
Yes, I think so.
Okay. All right. And Lena Westerfield. Yes. You got her to join. Way to go, man. Welcome. Right? So guests in attendance or former SABR members we haven't seen in a long time. Phil Boudreau. Yeah. And your guest is Oscar, right? Oscar Martinez. Kobe Ferries, as you all know, joined a couple of months ago. He likes SABR so much, he brought his dad. And walked in today in the restaurant a little confused. There was an interview going on. Towel's getting interviewed by Greg Randolph. He's a SABR member. Tony, I don't want to distort your last name. Sherry. Tony Busheri. And Suzanne Still. I met y'all at Astros Fan Fest, right? And last but certainly not least, Tim Healy. Okay? Not a member, but you're getting ready to join. Yeah. If you don't remember Tim, a long time ago when I was a history professor at U of H, I taught his son. So he passed. Know anything about my class? You just show up and do the work. You're all right. Okay. Those of you who are on Zoom, David, how you doing, David?
Doing fine. How are you doing?
Just fine. If we can hear David real fast, Did you just sent some stuff out about your Bill Burton book, right?
Yeah, as of last Friday, I was notified by the publisher that the book has been published. And so I expect to be receiving 110 copies of the book on Wednesday this week. And so we're going to start doing book signings. First person's going to get one is going to be Shirley Burden on Wednesday afternoon. So we'll be at SABR in Chicago. We're going to go to Pittsburgh in May. And we're going to go to West Plains, Bill and Shirley's old stomping grounds. We're down there all the time anyway. So anyway, we're excited to get the book finally in our hands after all this time.
Yeah, thank you, David. Y'all don't remember David. He was at the last May or 2 years ago. Bill Burden was one of our guests. And what?
St. Louis.
Yeah, did it on Zoom. Yeah, one of our largest, I think to this day, maybe the largest crowd ever
In May of 21.
was Bill Burton. Yeah. And we've been waiting for his book to publish, and David finally got the good news.
Well,
Go ahead, David.
Tal Smith wrote the foreword to this book, and I can't thank Tal enough and Larry Dierker for their contributions to this book. They were just invaluable.
Yeah.
And Craig Reynolds and Enos Cabell, and the list goes on.
Good. Well, thank you, David. You did a nice little segue. Registration for SABR 51 is open. Okay. It's going to be in Chicago, so you are going to be there, David?
Yes. We
All
will
right.
be.
So if you want a copy of Bill Burton's new book and you want it signed by the author, you have to go to SABR 51.
Well, we intend to come to Houston too, if that's okay.
Hold on a second, David. Hold on. I'm trying to get people to go to SABR 51.
Okay. All right. I'll wait for the next paragraph.
SABR 51 is July 5th through the 9th in Chicago. You can get the all-inclusive package for $339. Expiration for that, or you get the early SABR discount, $339. It includes registration to the whole conference, one seated ticket in the lower box corners to the White Sox Cardinals game on Friday, July 7th. One ticket to the awards luncheon, one ticket to the wedding reception, and a pin. Okay. But if you've never been to a conference before, a convention, it's really great. You get to meet people all over the country, and you get to see people like David signing a book. All right. So I'm going to go up a couple of days early. I convinced my wife. My wife and I were going up probably July 1st, and we're going to a Cubbies game. Okay. So the Cubs are out of town after the 2nd. Okay. So if you want to see the Cubs, all right, you got to go up before that Sunday game. July 5th through 9th. I'm sorry. Thank you, Mike. Thank you. So it's underway. If you have not had a chance to read the latest chapter newsletter, I highly suggest you do. Last month, we had a chapter member give a great presentation on umpiring, Jimmy Scruggs. He liked it so much, he wrote an article that he published in the newsletter about umpiring. You didn't throw anybody in. No. So if you want to read about umpiring, Jimmy's article, check it out, the newsletter. Great article, too. Great article, Jimmy. Yeah, great article. There's a lot of great articles in every, but you can get them on our website, SABRHouston.org. Just go under chapter newsletter. We also the next newsletter will be coming out probably right before regular season, right?
End of April.
End of April. Okay.
So any article could be in by April 15th.
Articles should be in by tax day. If you ain't got nothing better to do that day. All right. Last month we had a huge crowd for Allison Footer. I was shocked how large that crowd was. We had upwards of 50 plus people, I think. Allison gave a great presentation. And I think who really bought the people was Jimmy's umpiring presentation.
Yeah.
So
My gravy trained off.
but it was a great presentation. SABR Day in America on February 4th. You didn't have a chance to go. We recorded it. It's up on our chapter YouTube page. Brownie gave a talk about his fiction baseball book, Swinging for Glory. He told us a lot of good stuff about the writing process. And plus, we shared some memorabilia stories and things like that. So if you have a chance, all of our previous meetings are up on our YouTube page, the chapter YouTube page, and you can check those out. Next month, we will have Micah Costa and Gerald Sanchez here. You don't know who they are the voices of the Your Sugarland Space Cowboys. And Micah Costa has, if you don't know Micah Costa, just say the word Astrodome, and Mike will talk for an hour. That's all you have to say. All right, he knows. I've never met anybody in my life knows as much about the dome as that guy. But he was the historian for the team for the Astros, and now he's doing his own stuff. But they're going to be here March the 20th. In April, we have April 17th. We have another meeting. Justin McKinney, and May 15th, 2023, tentatively. But he just confirmed it. We're going to have Brett Chauncey, who is on. He does Locked On Astros podcast. So you know what's going on for the next couple of months, and I'm trying to lock somebody in for June. So don't miss the next couple of months, our meetings, and we're going to have some stuff in between all that. We're going to start talking about setting up a day at Constellation Field. So Mike will get that going. Okay, so all right. What did you think about the Hall of Fame vote? The only person that got in was Scott Rowland, 76.3%. Todd Helton, just below that, 72.2%. And then our guy, Billy Wagner, 68.1%. And Risen. This is his 8th year. Does anybody think he'll get in next year? I do.
How many chances did he get?
2.
2.
I would say this. Whenever Billy Wagner gets into the Hall of Fame, I'm planning my trip to Cooperstown. Yeah. So hopefully that'll be next year. The one thing that shocked me the most, and I don't know how y'all feel, but Carlos Beltran, on his first year of eligibility, got 46.5%. You think Carlos gets in the Hall of Fame, Brownie?
It's possible. I think more and more fans just kind of want to move on, Chief.
Okay.
Not the fans vote.
Okay. Well,
There's hope. Didn't Roland get like 10% his first year on the ballot?
Roland does not deserve
I said that.
it. I did.
the umpire, Roland. And that vote and the people that are coming up eligible in the next couple of years got me thinking about Jose Altuve. And many of you said I sent the email out. I got some responses from people. Altuve has 1,935 hits going into this year. This is his 13th year. And I asked the question, will he reach 3,000 hits? Quite a few of you overwhelmingly said, well, yeah, of course. A few people said no. One person said no, he'll mess up his ankle or something. I don't know what happened.
He needs 8 years and 150 years.
Yeah. So do all of you think Altuve will reach that 3,000 hit plateau or that milestone?
Barring any kind of major.
Barring any kind of major injury, they got rid of the shit. Got rid of the shit. And the bases are larger. Bases are larger. That's right. That's right. Yeah, he very well could so. One of the responses I got, and I'll have to find it, and I'll say it after our featured speakers talk tonight. One of y'all in here, and I can't remember who it is, not only They said not only is Altuve getting into the Hall of Fame, they gave me the exact date of when Altuve is going to get his 3,000th hit. Who was that? Anybody here online? Everybody here? I have the file. I have to find it. So I'll read to you what that person said. Okay, it's the exact day. So okay. Without further ado, though, we're all here to learn a little bit more about Ken Caminiti. All right. Tonight's guest is Dan Good. Dan flew in from New York just for this meeting. I don't know why, Dan, but we get the air miles. We really appreciate Dan flying into New York just to be at this meeting here. Dan is a longtime journalist, book writer, and a ghostwriter, right? You've written 20 books, ghostwriting? Ghostwriting, okay. And so about 20.
Yeah.
Okay. Mike, you got a question from Pat?
The survey, how many Caminiti fans you got?
How many Caminiti fans we have in here? Online, how many Caminiti fans? Lou, you're not a Caminiti fan?
Still is out.
All right. Well, Dan's career includes stop at the New York Daily News, the New York Post, ABC News, and NBC News. He spent, and I sent out an email earlier today. Jason Bristol, who's a chapter member, also works for KHOU. He interviewed Dan when the book came out. Yeah. And Dan was talking about the book a little bit. It's about 10 minutes long. Okay, if you want to watch the video. I didn't know this, but Dan it took 10 years to write the Caminiti book. 10 years. Now, Caminiti was also a part of my dissertation, so we're kind of comparing notes. Because when he was writing the book about Caminiti, I was also doing a little research on Caminiti. But, that's just... But if you haven't had a chance to read the book, it's called Playing Through the Pain. And it received a star review in Publishers Weekly and was a Casey Awards finalist as one of the year's best baseball books. I think it was Jason that said, Jason Bristol, in his opinion, it was the best baseball book of 2022, in his opinion. So, Dan enjoys baseball cards, right?
Yeah.
And you live outside of New York City.
Outside New York City.
Okay. With your wife and son.
Yeah.
And without further ado, Dan Good. Thank you, Dan.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here. To start off, I actually wanted to show you something because I think it's a good reflection of where I come from. I grew up in central Pennsylvania, and I went to a school called Millersville University, and I was honored to be included in the alumni newsletter, page 31, the last one. I was really proud of myself, and as I saw the cover, some other guy who did some good stuff for the Astros last year. So, same school as Chester. It's an honor to be here, and it's an honor to talk about Ken Caminiti's time with the Astros, because I think it gets overshadowed, it gets overlooked. He had so much success with the Padres. He won the MVP award with the Padres, and people lose sight of, the deep bond that he had with Houston, with the fans. The deep bond he had, going from his college days all the way to an all-star. There was so much that went into who he became, and the Astros were such a big part of that. You look at, I think nothing stood out more than his play at third base. The arm was just a cannon. It was a gun. It was awesome. All the plays he made on the turf, you were just stunned watching him. Like, he really surprised you. Every time you watched him play, he surprised you. And for me, as a fan of the 90s, I really just came to appreciate him. It felt like he was different from the other stars of his era. Somebody who was menacing to watch. He had that scowl. He really embodied something. He stood out from the other players of his era. And at the same time, I think that there's this complicated relationship he had with Houston and with the team, and for good reasons. I think there was important reasons for that. Going back to his childhood, he grew up in San Jose, California. He was a good player, but there's a lot of good players in the Bay Area. Barry Bonds is one of them. So Ken was always kind of overlooked, overshadowed. He went to San Jose City College. He went to San Jose State, which is a fine baseball school, but not a standout baseball school. It's more of a football school and a basketball school. So he got attention in his junior year. He started to really become noticed by scouts. There was one scout in particular, Rick Schrader. He was a scout for the Rangers, and he had been gunning for Ken for years. He befriended his family. He really ingrained himself in Ken's life. So when the draft came up and Ken had a great season in 1984, he separated his shoulder, as you would expect that he did. And he played through, and he came back too soon. He still had a great season, second team All-American. And the Rangers had the 66th pick in the third round. And Rick really wanted them to pick Ken. The Rangers are like, you know what? Let's pick Sid Aikens instead. Sid Aikens, he's going to be the future. So they picked Sid Aikens with the idea that Ken would still be around, not recognizing that the Astros had also been scouting Ken. So the Astros picked him with the 71st pick. But the problem with that was he was already playing for Team USA at that time. Instead of starting his minor league career, he was playing for Team USA with Mark McGwire, with Will Clark, with Barry Larkin, and Corey Snyder. Corey Snyder, who was the star third baseman of that team. So Ken was the backup. You can imagine how much Ken enjoyed that, being the backup of this team that was crisscrossing the country, playing all these minor league teams and local all-star teams. He wasn't happy. And the team was traveling to Houston. He played in the Astrodome for the first time. And then he got cut from the team just before the Olympics. So that left a bad taste in his mouth. But he didn't want to start his career right. He didn't want to start his pro career. He took about a month off. He went to fall league with the Astros for the first time. But by that point, Chuck Jackson had already kind of started his pro career. And he was also a third base prospect. Chuck played a lot of positions. He played the outfield as well. But he was kind of penciled in for third base. So it was Ken and Chuck Jackson kind of going up through the minors, positioning one against the other. Ken started his pro career in Osceola in 1985. He had a nice season, moved up to Double-A with a lot of the same players. Gerald Young, Rob Malakote were on those teams. 1986 Columbus, and they were managed by Dave Kripe. Dave Kripe had a lot of success with the 85 team at Single A. Double-A was a disaster. They were not getting along. They weren't gelling. Ken was not really connecting with Dave Kripe. It just wasn't working out. And none of the other players were either. So Dave Kripe got fired midway through the season. Columbus was in last place in the standings. And they brought in Gary Tuck. He was a baseball lifer. A lot of catching, coaching success. He eventually won some rings with the Yankees and the Red Sox. And he was a player's manager. And, it's interesting for me as I, really dived into Ken's life to look at the patterns. He didn't like managers who barked at him. He liked managers who, really rooted for him and cheered for him and supported him and encouraged him. He really needed that from a manager to really play his best. So when the manager change happened from Dave Kripe to Gary Tuck, Ken's batting average shot up, basically 100 points. Over the rest of the season, he batted 340. The team makes this huge turnaround. They end up winning the championship. They won the ring. Worst the first turnaround. And 1987 comes around, and Ken's really optimistic that he can, move up and he's still stuck in AA to start the season. He was batting .360 for the first month of the season. He's still stuck in AA. Basically he could do anything and he wasn't moving. He was stuck in Columbus. He was not happy at all. And Chuck Jackson had got promoted to the majors, and Dale Bear was playing third base for AAA. So Ken wasn't happy, needless to say. And then eventually, halfway through the season, 1986, 1987. Obviously, 1986 was a magical year for the Astros. Playoff success up until, the Mets series. And, there was a lot of potential and hope around the team that they were going to turn the corner in 87. And they did. They were in the doldrums. They were a 500 team. And around the All-Star break, they needed a jolt. So they decided to bring up Ken Caminiti from AA to the majors. Now, he got a jacket from JCPenney and joined the team in Houston. And his first game against the Phillies was magical game. He was amazing. He was just a revelation at third base. Diving stops, throws, switch hit power. He was everything, and he was so exciting to watch from the very beginning. What's that?
Did he get 4 hits that first game?
He had a triple and a home run his first game. He scored the winning run, and then he had a home run, I think, the next game, and then a double. So over the course of 3 or 4 games, he ended up winning the Player of the Week honors in the National League his first week in the major leagues. And that followed in the All-Star game, the minor league All-Star game, days before getting promoted. He hit a long home run off of some guy named Tom Glavine. So he had a pretty good week that week. I think at that point, he kind of felt like, I have this down. This is pretty easy. Now pitchers figured out the holes in the swing pretty quickly. So there was some adjustments to be made. And over the course of the season, he only hit 1 more home run after that initial burst. But the potential was there. You could see the greatness. 1988, again, so much excitement and energy and hope. I think there was so much hope around the Astros year to year. 1988 was another season where hope was a big thing. And Ken was a huge factor into those plans. He was going to be the third baseman of the future. This was his to lose, his spot to lose. And then he showed up late to spring training twice and got in Hallanier's doghouse. And that was not good. He and Hallanier did not gel. Hallanier had problems with a lot of players, obviously. But, he was not happy to be in Hal's doghouse. And, a lot of the veteran players, there were so many really solid veteran players on the team at that time. Billy Doran, Craig Reynolds, and they really took Ken under their wing, and really tried to help him along and mentor him and show him the way. They were frustrated, because they wanted more out of him. They wanted him to be the player that everybody thought he could be. So he got demoted to AAA Tucson. AAA Tucson had this catching prospect at the time, which was pretty good. His name's Craig Biggio, and he and Ken really bonded. And it was neat to see the bond happening. It was frustrating for him to be demoted, but at the same time, so special to see that bond happening and that friendship fostering from AAA on forward. Ken was always gritty. He was always, bruising, and he played the game as tough as possible, football, because football was really his favorite sport growing up, which is not surprising if you watch them play. He was always taking out catchers. He was always getting hurt, shoulder injuries, knee injuries, everything else. And he would just fight through everything. Finally got called back up at the end of the 88 season, but he had fallen out of favor with the team. The team didn't really know what to expect out of him. And at that point, they were really floating whether or not they wanted to trade him. He was floated in offers to the Red Sox. The Red Sox were not interested. The Braves weren't interested. It just wasn't working out. And he ended up going to Winter Ball in Puerto Rico in 1988 to 89. And that Winter Ball season really set the stage for him for the years ahead. It's one of those things that easily gets overlooked in Ken's story, but it really helped him feel confident and believe in himself, which is something that was not happening early in his career. And the other thing that really helped that offseason was Hal Lanier got replaced by Art Howe. Art Howe was a players manager. He believed in guys. He supported them. Ken knew that he was Art's guy, and that really meant a lot to Ken. You know, he felt like he could run through walls, and he would do so for Art at any point. You know, and there was a really deep bond there. You know, in 1989 was the start of something special for him. His 1989 defensive season, the statistics just jump off the page. This was one of the best seasons for a third baseman over the course of a decade. You know, he was standout. He easily should have won the Gold Glove in 1989. There's no doubt. But he didn't have an all-star. He didn't have the home runs, so he got overlooked. And that was one of the biggest problems, I think, with Ken's time in Houston. People outside of Houston didn't really know how good he was. You know, you heard little whispers here and there. But to Astros fans who are watching him every day and seeing things happening, he's doing that you don't see anywhere else. You don't see anybody else making these plays, and he's not getting the attention. You know, it was a really frustrating thing about the voting back then. You know, it was about star power. So Terry Pendleton and Matt Williams were winning Gold Glove awards at a time when Ken should have been winning them. 1989 and 1994 especially, he was the best defensive third baseman in the league, bar none. 1989 especially was just a transcendent season, and it was, you know, he played 160 games at third base on that turf. No other third baseman in the Astrodome era played that many games in a season at third base. And it's just a really tough position to play. And, you know, Ken brought that bruising nature. He brought that quickness. You know, his instincts were just so fast. You know, being able to see the bat head, to recognize the shadows, you know, as the hitters, you know, bring the bat through the zone, like recognizing the little things, you know, and then being able to just get up and gun the ball across the diamond. I mean, there was something really special about that. And, you know, it came at a time when there was no Baseball Tonight. Baseball Tonight started the year after. You know, it happened when people didn't have video. Just
No, it's somewhere. It's on the kitchen. I brought it to the
I'm when he couldn't just pick up a phone and watch his highlights. You know, and that was a disservice. I think there was a lot of people who missed the opportunity to see some of his greatest plays. So when he was with the Padres and he was getting all this attention for the greatest plays, he was making those plays with the Astros too. People just weren't seeing them all. You know, one of the things that really stood out to me, one of the stories that matters so much to me, is the idea that this 13-year-old in the Dominican Republic in the early 1990s could watch an Astros broadcast and see Ken and say, I want to do that for my career. And that's what Adrian Beltre did. He was watching an Astros broadcast and said, I want to be like Ken. That's exactly what happened. He became literally the best third baseman of, you know, the past, I don't know, before the Nolan Arenado time. It was kind of that, you know, that torch being passed from one to the other. And when I talked to Matt Williams about Ken on defense, he said Ken was the standard. And he was. Ken was the standard in the National League for third baseman between, we'll say, 1985 and the mid-90s to late 90s. He passed the eye test. You know, he was really just something else. And, you know, since he was getting overshadowed, there was that resentment, I think. You know, it was like, what do I have to do to get noticed? You know, and it's funny because when he first started winning Gold Gloves, his seasons weren't actually as statistically strong as they were when he played for the Astros. He had those great plays where he'd throw a guy out from his butt or, like, you know, gun the ball across the diamond. So he was getting those accolades then, but it was really kind of a career award. It was like a lifetime achievement award. You know, it was all those plays he made for the Astros that really stood out and were so special. You know, you can't look at Ken's story without looking at the tough times too. And I think one of the frustrations that the Astros had was they knew how talented he was. They knew what a great guy he was. And yet sometimes that didn't translate all the way into the field. You know, he was inconsistent. He'd only top out at like 13 home runs a year, and they wanted more out of him. You know, they wanted more out of him in terms of his growth, in terms of the leader he could be for the clubhouse. And, you know, because he was struggling with addictions off the field, he really struggled to embody the role that the Astros wanted for him. As a result, they started looking outside the organization for potential third baseman of the future. So when they were trading away all the players, all the veteran players in the late 80s and early 90s, they had to trade Larry Anderson, who was a great clubhouse presence, for the Red Sox for a third base prospect named Jeff Bagwell. You know, and it's when you have somebody like Jeff Bagwell come on, there's this idea that he's going to take your job. You know, this guy's really good. He's, you know, hitting the ball really well in the minor leagues. This guy's something special. And it's so fascinating to me to look at the 1991 Astros. I think there could just be a book based on that 1 year or 2 years. But you look at all the talent coming into camp, and you look at this 97 loss team, and they have three people competing for the third base spot: Ken Caminiti, Jeff Bagwell, and Luis Gonzalez. Those are the three guys competing for the same position. How much star power? How much talent? Kudos to Art Howe. You know, after Ken was hitting 750 in spring training, he said, "All right, I can't move Ken out of that spot." You know, and Ken didn't have as many positions to work with. So maybe we can try Jeff Bagwell at first base, and maybe we can try Luis Gonzalez in left field. And you look at how much success those players had over the course of the next decade and a half, and it's just stunning. And then you look at the talent of the early 90s Astros, and you know, I look at the parallel between the early 90s Astros and the 2010s Astros. And one was a dynasty, if you want to call it dynasty realized. The other one was dynasty potential that never formulated properly. The 1991 Astros had Curt Schilling, Kenny Lofton, Pete Harnisch, Darryl Kyle, Ken Caminiti, Jeff Bagwell, Craig Biggio. I mean, that's the core of a world champion team. And then they had the number one pick in the 1992 draft. Okay, now we're cooking. Great. And there is this shortstop prospect out of Michigan who seems really exciting. But the Astros obviously didn't want to spend any money. It's kind of a recurring theme for the Astros in the late 80s and early 90s. Didn't want to spend money. So they picked Phil Nevin, who happens to play in the same position as Ken. You know, it's really tough for him to feel wanted when every single year somebody else is coming in that wants to take his job. The interesting thing for me, though, is that Ken easily could have rejected Phil and said, "This guy's gunning for my job. Forget him. I'm going to do everything I can to bury him." And instead, Ken invited Phil to his house in the offseason to work out together because he wanted to show him what it meant to be a major league player. He easily could have rejected this guy, turned him down, done everything he could to make sure he doesn't take his job. And instead, he said, "I want you to be the best you can." And he did that multiple times with multiple teammates. He did that with George Arias for the Padres. He did that for Dave Matranga, actually. Took Dave Matranga under his wing. Dave Matranga hit one home run for the Astros. Now he's Aaron Judge's agent. So, curious. But, you know, it's just interesting to see the way he bonded with players, the way he bonded with his teammates, the kind of teammate he was, the respect he carried in that clubhouse. And, you know, the Astros of that era really bonded on the road trip. In 1992, the RNC was in Houston, meaning the Astros had to play on the road. They went on a 27-day road trip all across the country. You can't even do that today in the Major League Baseball. They actually outlawed the ability to take such a long road trip. So this will be, the Astros road trip will be the longest road trip that we'll ever see again. And it's interesting because up to that point, the Astros were kind of middling, mid-range. They were, you know, win one, lose two. You know, they wouldn't really jump out a series. They weren't winning series. And after the road trip, they were winning series consistently. Like, this is a team that's building and growing. You know, 1992 to 1993, this was a team. This was something special. New ownership group in place, new energy, you know, new logos would come soon after. There was a lot of excitement around. And at the same time, Ken was really struggling. His addictions were really spilling out in the view. And, the Astros team really, again, they tried really hard to help him. He was having meetings with the front office. Art Howe was talking to him. Art Howe actually pulled him aside one time and said, maybe you can go get some help. We'll say you pulled your hamstring. Let's brush this aside and you can go get some help. Ken did not want to do that. He wanted to play. He was going to play no matter what, which was a great thing about him and also like a frustrating thing about him because he clearly, and this was throughout his career, whether it was internal suffering or external pain, he was always going to play through anything, no matter what. And, it was something that so many players appreciated about him, going all the time. But sometimes you really need to step back and take care of those things, and 1993 turns to 1994. So Ken, after the 1993 season, went to rehab and got help for his addictions. And he was in such a good place. He was, much emotionally stronger. He really focused on his recovery. And he was, after a slump to start the season, he was hitting the ball like he never had before. And I think it's a really special thing to think about because it's so easy for two things. One, to recognize that there were years in the early 90s where he wasn't playing to his potential. And then there's also periods in the late 90s where you recognize that steroids had played an impact on his play. 1994, he was not using steroids and he wasn't using street drugs. And he was an all-star. He was a Gold Glove caliber third base. Like, let's just throw all those ideas out the window. This guy was a great player, without those substances. And it was exciting to see the player he could become finally, because there was so much lost potential. And there was so much missed opportunity with him. He was an all-star for the first time. He was hitting more home runs than he ever had. The Astros were finally winning. And that's a special thing too. All those years, it had been kind of disappointing, especially into 90, 91, 92. And now they're finally breaking free. They're finally winning again. And then the strike happens and the season's, right? It's all lost, which was a huge, huge disappointment. And then, over the offseason, the move is made to shed salary. And Ken was making, he had one of the biggest salaries on the team, because of his service time. And the move was made to trade him, Steve Finley, and a couple other players to the Padres. It's a 12-player trade that was, worked out over the course of many conversations over a couple. It was really held for about a month. The news of the trade was actually held for about a month. And, I think there was always that idea with the Astros that there was unfinished business, unfulfilled expectations. One of the things that was really special about his connection with Houston came in '95 when he was returning to play with the Padres against the Astros. And he was invited to a dinner and he was honored with a ceremonial Gold Glove trophy. It wasn't an actual Gold Glove, but he was being honored and celebrated for basically winning, what should have been a Gold Glove. And it was one of the biggest and most powerful awards that he got. He ended up winning the MVP, which was really special. But that award meant a lot to him because it meant a lot to be celebrated by his peers, by Houston and recognized and, honored that way. And, I think that's important. It's easy to lose sight of the success he had with San Diego. I know he came back after the 1998 season and things weren't the same. He was really struggling again. But you look at, there's so many stories from Astros fans, I talked to the autograph show person, Tom Kappa, and he was telling me about a time in the late 80s when someone took a photograph of Ken's butt. This woman took a photograph of Ken's butt. And they got the print of this and they made like 200 copies. And they were actually selling this picture signed by Ken at shows. And they sold out the window. Feel the heat posters were amazing. He was well, both. The unclothed one was crossing some boundaries, especially at that time. It was pretty suggestive. I think Ken connected with fans in so many different ways. He connected with people who were attracted to him physically. He connected to people who appreciated good baseball because he was great as that. He connected with kids. One of the most touching interviews I did, and I interviewed 400 people, was an Astros fan named Andy Comau, and he was part of 65 Roses, 60 cystic fibrosis organization. So in the early 90s, those kids got invited to Astros games, and Andy loved the Astros. He loved all the players. He had all the baseball cards. So he got invited to the Astrodome to go see his heroes, and he was really nervous. He was, just stopped. He couldn't say anything. He was stunned. And he was telling me, I interviewed him in like 2014, and he was telling me about how nervous he was and how Ken made him feel comfortable. I think Ken did a really good job of that. He really went out of his way to make people feel comfortable, to meet them on their level, to not look down on people. It's so easy, and especially in this era, for us to look down on others. And Ken never did that. Subsequently, I went to, after the Astros won the World Series in 2017, I went to track down Andy. I thought of him and didn't realize that he had passed away. It was really sad. He passed away in like 2015. But, Ken left a lot of light in the world. And I think it's easy to look at the headlines, look at the tough times, look at the sadness, and lose sight of that. Lose sight of the fan connection he had, signing autographs, being a part of this community, and really raising a family here. He was a special presence, and the Astros days in Houston meant a lot to him, even if there were frustrations on the baseball business side of things, as I think is the case with a lot of players. I think there was a lot of patterns that we saw from his earlier days and his later days that were reflected in Houston, but he did so much growing here, from his college days to an all-star, and I think that, he left a lot of his heart here when he left. And, I think that there was a really strong connection to this community, and so much to be proud of, even if there were some tough times. I mean, he was just somebody who you always wanted to root for. He really had a good heart. And, I just think it's important that people not lose sight of that. So. Insights, but I'd love to hear them. Yes.
I'm sure you could talk at great length about research to write a nonfiction book on it.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit about research involved in writing a nonfiction book. There's a little flavor for what's involved.
Yeah, I mean, for a book like this, I spent a year researching his life. I actually felt kind of an imposter syndrome of like, am I the person to write this book? Maybe somebody else knows him better than I. I never met Ken. I think that that's something that stuck with me. I knew him as a fan. I didn't know him as a person at a personal level, and a lot of people did. So I dove into research. I researched every newspaper article I could find. I found every book I could find, media guides. I would scour eBay. I found like a 1995 Padres strength training guide. Like, how would you even find that? Videos on YouTube were great. 1990 Astros, they did a video that was really good. I got a lot of information from that one. I just looked everywhere. And then once I started interviewing people, I spent a year just researching, and then I started interviewing people in 2013 and interviewed people through 2020.
I assume you interviewed Biggio and Bagwell.
I did.
You did.
No.
What do they say about them? They just seem to be such great friends when they were together.
They were.
You would see them out at dinner and stuff. I was just interested to kind of hear what
they were.
those relationships were.
I wish they had participated. I definitely tried on numerous occasions. I talked to a lot of people who tangentially talked about their friendship, and their friendship was obviously covered so heavily throughout the years. They had such a deep bond, and I think that they were in that hurricane at times, in the middle of that hurricane. But they tried so hard to help him, and they cared so much. And, you know, that friendship really, you saw it in their faces when they found out he had passed away. Like there was a palpable, real connection there, and it really carried.
What made you choose Ken Caminiti as a subject?
It's a good question. I loved him as a fan. You know, I've been moved by, my father had passed away in 1997, so I was kind of stuck in this mode of like focusing on sad things, to be honest. I hate to say it, but it's true. And he was somebody I just always gravitated toward as a fan. I just always appreciated watching his highlights and seeing the player he was. And then when he came out in Sports Illustrated in 2002 and talked about steroids, that meant a lot to me, for him to stand up and admit to that when no one else was, and almost no one else has, even in the 20 years since. And then when he passed away 2 years later, as a fan and as a journalist, I just had so many questions. And for me, I'm always gravitating toward the things that I care about. And for whatever reason, his story just mattered to me. And, you know, I think it really needed to resonate, because in order to be able to carry it as far as I did, as long as I did, you really need to have something connecting to that inside of you. And without that, it would have been like, oh, this is too tough, I'm going to walk away. But I want to keep going with it.
Yeah, kind of stole my thunder a little bit. I'm talking about the confession. That's part of the book here.
Yeah.
Can you talk about how Verducci felt after that interview with Caminiti in his garage, telling him, "Hey, yeah, this is going on, and everybody knows."
So this is the real story. It wasn't starting with Tom Verducci. It was actually starting at a motorcycle rally in Las Vegas with the CNNSI producer. You know, Tom Verducci is a great journalist. I give him all the credit. But there was somebody else who got the interview before he did. So what happened was CNNSI, which was folding as a network at the time, was trying to get somebody to talk about steroids in baseball. And they kind of went through the list and they said, oh, you know, Ken, he just came out of rehab. Maybe he's willing to talk. So they called Ken and he said, yeah, I have nothing to hide. Come out, talk to me. So the CNNSI producer, Jules Bailey, goes to Vegas with a photographer and they record an interview with Ken. But since CNNSI was closing, they wanted to hold the interview, hold the story for the magazine. So they gave the story to Tom Verducci, who then did a subsequent interview with Ken in his garage in Texas. At the same time that was happening, Jose Canseco was talking to Jim Rome and telling Jim Rome 85% of players are used. Wow, that's a lot of players. 85% is a huge number. I don't even know that that's realistic. Like, even with all my research, I don't think 85 could be possible. However, it's definitely a big number. So about a week to 10 days after that, Tom Verducci's article comes out, and it set everything afire. It was Pandora's box opening. But it's interesting because you had the magazine article that was online, and then if you go to CNN's coverage, have video from the separate video interview that was done with Ken. So it's interesting matching up and tracking down the CNNSI producer and saying, like, you're the one who wrote the story. Like, obviously, Tom Verducci did a great job carrying it forward, but it started with a CNNSI producer. And, you know, for Ken, it was a sense of he felt like he had nothing to hide. He had just come out of rehab. You know, he felt like the truth would set him free. And that's what you're told in rehab. The truth will set you free. Yeah, maybe it doesn't apply so much to talking to Sports Illustrated about using performance-enhancing drugs. You know, maybe that's a stretch. You know, and that's what's tough about it. You know, I think he did it for very pure reasons, innocent reasons. You know, he wanted to clear his conscience, and he felt like, you know, he's not trying to burn anybody. Jose Canseco was trying to burn everything to the ground because he wasn't getting a job. Ken was simply speaking his truth after coming out of rehab. There's very different reasons. And I think that ties to why, you know, Ken's held in higher regard today for coming forward for purer reasons than Jose, who wanted to sell a book and promote himself and burn baseball down. Yes.
What was the most interesting thing you learned about Caminiti's life?
It's a lot of them. The details of his steroid use was interesting to me. because in Sports Illustrated, he talked about going to Mexico by himself and just haphazardly doing these drugs. And that's not what happened. He had a friend from high school, Dave, who actually did the driving and who set up his program for him and set up programs for dozens of other players. You know, and I think that that has been overshadowed because when he comes forward and says, I did this all by myself, sure, you want to believe it. And he was being truthful about, you know, using steroids. But, you know, there was a lot of half-truths. There was a lot of shades of gray to the whole conversation because he was really covering for a lot of other people. Because when your friend is supplying steroids to dozens, if not hundreds of players, you're covering now for a lot of people. If you're taking the fall for everybody and putting it all on yourself and, you know, not bringing up the fact that all these other people are involved. He could have easily named names and he didn't. And I think that really stands out. But, you know, there was a couple elements of his childhood that stand out for me. You know, I think for me, it's the idea that this was the guy. The guy you saw playing for Houston was the same guy who was playing for San Jose State, who was the same guy who was playing in the minor leagues, who was the same guy who was playing in winter ball. You know, it's funny when you talk about the Snickers game with the Padres, when he picked himself off the table, when he had food poisoning. You know, he got 2 bags of IV fluid, ate a Snickers bar and went out and hit 2 home runs. You know, he did something similar in winter ball. He didn't hit 2 home runs, but he you know, was sick as a dog and comes back and ends up playing the game. He was always that guy. And the same thing with his shoulder. Like he was just playing through every type of pain. And even amid all these problems, you look at how much talent he had, how much ability he had, how good he was, even amid all these problems. And it really is mind-boggling.
So Dan, like I mentioned to you earlier when we were talking, I was there at that magical night when Caminiti showed up, right? I was just there with the band. Yeah, the new kids, right? And what a show he put on. But I'm curious, you know, you spent 10 years of your life. I'm sure you had other things going on in your life 10 years, but you spent a lot of time on this book.
Yeah.
But you never met him.
No.
You didn't speak to, you know, 2 of his best friends, the Astros. So if by some magic, you were able to have a conversation with Ken Caminiti, what would you ask him?
I have so many questions, so many. So many questions. I'd ask him about the earthquake in 1993. They were playing the Dodgers and at 4 or something in the morning. There was this huge earthquake. And he was the first one down. He was awake. I'd ask him about that. I'd ask him about a second time in Houston. You know, he was really spiraling and there were so many players and people around the team that were trying to help him. You know, I'd ask him, I want to know about what it felt like to play third base. You know, he's talked about it in interviews, but it's not the same as hearing it from him. You know, I'd love to get his perspective of what it felt like to play, what it felt like to be a better switch hitter, because that's something he really worked at. You know, he only started switch hitting in college. His sophomore year of college was the first time he was switch hitting in a game, in an actual game. So, you know, there's so many questions I have just about the gameplay, you know, and I could ask other people and kind of extrapolate, but there's so much I'd want to know just about him, his feelings, his desires, and that drive to be great.
Yeah, Canseco said 85%. Sounds kind of high.
Kind of high.
Did you get a sense for what that number really was? Even if you had to kind of estimate it, what would you say?
Maybe 30, 25, 30, somewhere in that range.
I remember that earthquake and I remember seeing him and worked a lot. We all went downstairs.
Yeah.
It's friends of ours, just fans who lived in our area, that made the trip out to the series. And they actually asked him for his autograph. And I was so embarrassed. Signed it. Drinking in an early,
Yeah.
which you backed up very well here. How much you think that played into it, and was there a lot of guilt on the part of his parents about that?
I think that for kids growing up in that time period, and especially in San Jose, it was very loose. It was very free. I don't think the parents had any idea what their kids were doing. It was just passed down from older siblings. It was just open and available. And I definitely think that factored into things because by the time he was a pro drinker too, you know? You know, a lot of these players became better drinkers when they became pro baseball players. He was already a drinker. Like, it was just feeding into that. And then it's this idea of, you know, oh, you're 4 for 4, go drink. 0 for 4, go drink. You can always psych yourself into doing things. And this was really, that up and down spiral was a really big problem for him, because when you're a major league player and when you're traveling across the country and when you have night games and day games and day after day you're living out of your suitcase, you know, there's always a party, there's always something happening. You're traveling from one place to another, and it just, everything's disrupted, but it's like, you can go drink, you can go drink, you can go drink day after day after day. And it's encouraging in some ways. So I think that baseball lifestyle definitely factored into the problems he had. But to your point, those problems were already brewing, and it was just this storm, seeing those things combine.
I'm curious in your opinion, who do you think Ken Caminiti's biggest role model or impact player was growing up? College?
He liked Jack Clark. He wasn't a big fan. It's interesting. I was reading Jeff Pearlman's book about Bo Jackson actually pretty recently, and Bo Jackson made his MLB debut against Steve Carlton. And after the game, you know, someone was asking about Steve Carlton. He's like, I don't know who Steve Carlton is. Ken wasn't that, you know, that far along in terms of not being a fan of the game. He definitely was, but he wasn't as motivated by that. He wasn't like a lot of players who were like students of the game growing up. You know, I think 49ers players would have been a closer match to him. Yeah, I definitely love football, but it's interesting. He wasn't that kind of player.
Maybe not player. What about the role model, not from a player's point of view, for, you know, father figure or somebody else who's there?
He definitely, that's a really good question. He definitely looked up to his father, and he definitely looked up to his older brother. Those were definitely two huge influences for him. You know, and then when he became a pro, and he became a major leaguer, he had so many players in the Astros who really mentored him. Billy Doran's a huge one. There was a lot of players who really cared and really mentored him and did their best. And I think he really gravitated toward those guys, because there was such a strong veteran presence in that clubhouse in the late 80s for the Astros. And he really respected and appreciated being a part of that group and being, you know, accepted by that group. That was a big thing for him.
Yeah, I want to share 2 things with you. I had season tickets right on the third base dugout. I got to see Caminiti. I saw Raider. I saw Bell, all of them. And Caminiti came up, and we had our group of friends there. You were talking about the fans. We were just cool, because he was so cat quick. He could catch them behind the coach's box. When he had this, we didn't have a good arm. He had a chance. And it is boom, and we could not believe what we were seeing. It was just incredible.
It was.
But I have one good story. So a friend of mine asked me to share the tickets with San Diego, 4 seats there. Because this girl was a big fan and she wanted to get his autograph.
Mm-hmm.
Then he called me up. We used to meet over at Papacito's and said, my wife's expecting tomorrow. Can you just meet her there and take her over? So other friend and I sharing the seats with. We met her at Papacito's and took her over. Watched the game. And then the Astro used to be right behind, the visitor dugout was right behind third base.
Yeah.
So we went back there to wait for him, but he had gone over to visit with Backville and Edgy. He didn't come out for a while. So I messed with him. She looked like my niece. The niece's name is Casey. So I remember her name because it was Stacy. So she almost had the same name. It's, all right, Stacy, I want you to practice saying your name is meeting. So she did. And when he finally came out, he came out with a shirt on. And the guy was very well built. You know? And she just stood there with funny, and she didn't speak when we got back to Papa.
Great story.
All right, anybody else?
Talking about art now, pretty good influence on here.
Yeah.
And Jim can get to talk to Art.
I did talk to Art. Art was awesome. I talked to Art in 2013 or 2014. It's funny looking back and seeing how I was able to track some of these people down, but Art was awesome. He and Ken and Art had such a great connection. And, you know, it's interesting looking at Ken and Art and Ken and Bruce Bochy and similar, you know, pattern, similar connection, but they adored each other, and it was a great bond.
Well, Dan, thank you very much. You win the trivia contest tonight, you get a copy of Dan's book, and he said he would autograph it for you. So there's one left. Huh? Yeah, I bet you do. Hey, before people start leaving, I cannot believe I forgot this. And, you know, I don't feel worthy as president. But January 21st of this year, who went to Fan Fest? At Fan Fest, the Astros made an announcement. Their 2023 Hall of Fame induction class. And the newest, one of the two newest members, and both members were mentioned today. One of the two newest members is sitting in the room. Bill Brown. You will be inducted officially August 12th. Is that the ceremony? Astros versus Angels.
Keep your nose clean, Bill.
Keep your nose clean. The other inductee, we've already talked about him today, or Dan has, Bill Doran. Okay, so Bill will be there, right?
Yes.
Okay. Since I really fell in love with the Astros, the 86 team, as much as I love 2017, 2022, I mean, they're on top here. Just a smidge below is that 86 team. Bill Doran is just, it's a big part of it. So I'm like a kid in a candy store. So, all right. Before we get to our next presentation, I just want to say I found out who sent me the email. It was Bob Stevens. Bob is not here. Bob Stevens wrote, and I quote, "Yes, Altuve will get his 3,000 hit on September the 2nd, 2029.
Give you an inning?
He'd give you an inning. But hey, 2029, we got to talk to Bob. So, all right. So we have another presentation. Caminiti related? Mike?
Yeah.
Okay. Mike McCroskey and Chris. There you go, Mike.
This is very fortuitous, the way this worked out. What?
Oh, I'm getting you queued up.
Oh, okay. All right, I wrote an article for the Shooting Star about things in the Astrodome I've seen that were interesting. And the first one was about Johnny Bench, and he hit an inside the park home run that bounced back shortstop off the wall. He hit it so hard. And when I researched it, it was the only inside park home run he ever hit. So I had another interesting thing happen to me. And right now I want to take a poll. Can a player go into the dugout to make a catch? You always see these people almost falling in. Is it legal to go in the dugout or not? Just a show of hands. How many think it is?
That's on the ground rules ballpark.
How many think it isn't? All right. So my wife and I used to go to these parties when she was a nurse at Texas Children's, and I met some different people there. And one was a crime reporter for the Chronicle named Eric, and he was a baseball fan. We talked a lot of baseball. So I mentioned I had these first front row seats at third base, so I invited Eric to a game, and it was against the Dodgers. And he'd tell me what a great baseball player he was, this, that, and the other. But I've been looking for that game because it was memorable to me. They hit a pop fly right at me and Eric. But It was more towards Eric. My wife was between us, and she was 4 months pregnant with my daughter at that time, and it was a good souvenir, but wasn't that important to me to trample her. So I'm watching Eric, and we're looking up at the ball, and the ball comes down right between his forearms. He must, so I'm thinking this, but I look down, and there's Ken Caminiti. Our seats are right, but so in Lasorda the next day was irate because Caminiti had come into the dugout and made the catch. It was the 8th inning of a 3-2 ball game. 2 men on base. Eric Karros, their cleanup hitter, was up. So it was a really tense situation. If Eric had caught the ball, we might have lost the game. And that was the 10th consecutive loss for the Dodgers at home to the Astros at the time. But I couldn't find the dates. It's taken me a year and a half to look it up. And they changed the dugouts. But anyway, I got lucky. I never found the article because I wanted to read what Lasorda had to say, but we found a video. So I sent it to Chris, got Chris Berman doing the highlights of this game. So I never got to see this play. And this was May 16th, 1993. So here's a play you may never have seen. It starts off with a ground ball to Ken, and he makes one of those throws.
Yeah, I'm gonna share the screen.
He makes his routine play, and when you stop action, the power the guy puts behind him. Just
Dodgers. Also in the field, oh, by the way, Ken Helmet Caminiti at third. Nice backhander on Tim Wallach in the fourth. At the plate, Doug Drabeck. Outstanding athlete, good at the plate. Base hit, scores Andujar Cedeno. Astros lead at 2-0. Dodgers down now 2-1. And Corey Snyder, every time he gets in a lineup, he does some good.
Caminiti's nemesis.
Here he hits Drabeck, shot off the wall. Mike Pepperoni Piazza. Motors home, and we're tied at 2. Bottom of the 7th, same score, tied at 2. It's Drabeck. Are you kidding? Back. God.
His second and last career home run.
But then top of the 8th, look at Caminiti in the Dodger dugout. In the stands. Makes the playoff. Karros' pop. Defense, pitching, and pitchers hitting.
What?
And the Astros beat the Dodgers 3-2.
But that was it. Do you have any stop action?
We have the slower motions.
Oh, we gotta do it again in slow mo. But that's the play. I never got to see the play ever.
Oh, by the way, Ken Helmet Caminiti at third.
I'm watching the foul ball.
Backhander on Tim Wallach in the fourth.
Let's see if I got it. That's the play you wanted of him.
Yeah, the power he puts. He's amazing. It was just a pleasure to watch.
All right, now here's the play of them going to the dugout.
This is so heads up.
In the Dodger dugout. In the Dodger dugout. Makes the playoff.
Sideways and catch it between Eric's arms. A slimmer, younger version. Here.
Where's your Astro jersey, Mike?
You take it from back, didn't
But anyway, that's my story. I was going to write that for the shooting star, but when I found the video, I just thought of it. Like I say, I had never seen it. So that's presentation number 1.
Yeah, because we have a little slideshow.
What else? Oh,
We have
the rules. You got
the rule. We have the rule.
Okay, so that was the third out to retire the side in the 8th. And we won the game 3-2. Forget who came in relief. But so I show that play and say we won the game. And then Chris sends me back this, hey, Mike, this rule.
Let me share the screen first.
Chris Farley sent this to you?
There's Chestnut right here.
Now, I couldn't find the rule book from nineteen
You
ninety-three.
can't do it.
So this is the current rule. A batter may reach into but not step into a dugout to make a catch.
And Ken more than stepped into it.
It's a safety issue.
Yeah, don't.
Bill mentioned it.
Sure, Tommy did not know the ground rule.
Yeah.
He only managed about 50,000.
Sometimes we just wanted to skip the game when the Dodgers came in and go straight to the. But anyway, so according to the rules now, you can't do it. I don't know what they were back then. Chris and I both tried to look, see, Google what we could and find out what we could, but apparently I guess it was legal, because you're right, it was sort of.
Well, the umpire have to know that.
Yeah,
They would not allow that catch.
but until I saw this, I'm still thinking, yeah, you can go in the dugout and make the catch. So I learned something else here. When Chris sent me the email going, hey, Mike, you can't do it.
Right, that looked like a flat dugout. He didn't go down steps and all that stuff.
Yeah, no,
Or you can't have Minute Maid, nor would you want to.
Yeah, that's pretty steep.
Don't you say go.
we always see the people catching the catcher when he's trying to catch a pop-up or something like that, keeping him from falling. But anyway, I just thought all that was interesting.
What was the bourbon name for Caminiti?
What was that?
What was the bourbonist name, Caminiti? You said Ken.
Helmet Caminiti.
Daddy was. Wow.
All right, anyway, I just thought that was fun to share. I was gonna try to do that with Shooting Star.
Morning, second. Good. Mayor and Judge Dick Bile.
Yeah, I'll introduce him. So Dick Valley called me up when Judge was holding out this spring and saying, "I can't hit any good pitcher." So Mr. Chestnut is very good at doing these statistical analysis of things. So I said, why don't you do this for Dick Viley and do a comparison of Judge's home runs, how many hit off good pitchers, how many hit off bad pitchers. So Chris being who he is, he can't do one.
Had to give you the complete picture.
Yeah, right. So
Okay.
we did some more, and then Dick Viley also said, you know, I was in a conversation once, he'd met Ted Williams several times. It's okay, because Dick's over 90, but he's going, he was talking to Tony Gwynn. Said, Tony, how'd you hit off the really good pitchers? Well, I hit 280, 300. I thought he hit better than that, but you know, he had a 330 lifetime average. And he asked Ted Williams, how'd you hit off the good pitchers? I could hit them all. He said, they're stupid. They'll give me a good pitch sooner or later. They're all stupid. So I got Chris to go back, and I hadn't even seen this. And I had Ted Williams and Mickey Mouse. Everybody likes Mickey Mouse. So we've got how many batters?
Preparing Judge to 8.
8. So Judge and 7 more, right?
Right.
With
No,
their best-
Judge plus 8, so 9 total.
9. Their career years,
With their career best
year,
home run year.
year, including our own
Jordan.
Albert.
Okay, so
Turn it over to
trying to find a methodology of how to picture strengths. We just did WAR, wins above replacement. So if you so this is but basically what your WAR number is. Starter, this means for an everyday player. This is more for batters, but the same concept. So 5 and above, you're an all-star. 8 above, you're an MVP. When you get less than 0, or you're just anybody can come up and take your place, you're not really that important. So look at Aaron Judge. He had 62 home runs off 56 different pitchers and the average WAR was 0.89.
Chris, this is,
The pitchers he had home runs off of, their WAR was 8.9, was 0.89 was their average. Well, I didn't know if that was good, bad, or indifferent. So, right. So we looked at these 8 other batters because they had Ruth, obviously, McGuire, Bonds, Stanton hit 59 home runs in 2017, Maris, and then Mike asked me to add in Williams and Mantle. So we found Williams' best year. And then just as a kind of control, we had Jordan, just see because he's another 22 hitter, and that was his career year. And he had a good year going. And then he kind of faded off. So here's their year, the batter in their season, and then how many home runs they had. And then the number of pitchers they hit home runs off of. And the home runs per pitcher. So you can see Ruth, that's back in the day, there's no relief pitchers. So he had almost 2 home runs off each pitcher that he faced. Of the home runs he hit, off 2 per pitcher. And then the average WAR of what they faced for home runs, Ruth was 2.2, which was obviously his best, but you see it decreases pretty much every decade until you get down to where Jordan's was 0.55. So Jordan was hitting his home runs off of scrubs. So
also more relief pitchers, right?
There was more relief pitchers. So you see, there are only like McGuire. He had 65 different pitchers he had home runs off that year. Judge had 56. And so here's the best pitcher they hit home runs off of. Bonds and Ruth hit one off the 8 or above. They had 3 home runs off those guys. And Jordan's best pitcher was Brady Singer. Shohei gave up a home run to Aaron Judge. And you can see who the names were back in the day. Now, taking this and looking at how it spreads out over the different kind of groups of WAR, a lot of numbers here. This is kind of hard to read, so we made it into a chart. And you can see the blue at the bottom is the worst pitchers. The orange is the 0 to 2 kind of replaceable guys. And as you go up the top of the chart, you get the more difficult pitchers to hit. Jordan hit almost 90% of his home runs off of basically replaceable pitchers. Judge did have 1 or 2 off of very decent pitchers, but you can see that Bonds and Ruth hit theirs off the best pitchers. But you see the sum of the orange and the blue, it just creeps up over the decades. Those are in chronological order from Ruth to Alvarez.
raise the house.
Put Caminiti in there.
We thought about adding Aaron, but not the problem with Aaron, but the problem with this is he had a lot of great years. He had a lot of 40+ years, not that one spike year that was better than everybody else. He never did. And besides, I already had the thing set for 8. 8 looked good. 9 would have been difficult just for presentation wise. I was already done when he made the last minute suggestion. I said, no, we're not going to talk about Aaron. So we can extend this further if there's somebody particular you want to look at. So that is the Dick Biley number.
Next question.
How much, like how the more importance of the reliever in today's game,
Yes.
starting pitcher, and so you just see so many more just
Because the
one and done
the wars of the relief pitchers aren't.
right. Like Pat was saying here, you see if you put the average with like all Major League Baseball, it would probably follow that same trend as well. We're kind of seeing it with
But you look at
wars, great relief pitchers.
but there's also
but you look at Alvarez's 46 home runs off pitchers with a WAR of less than 0. So you're not even talking about relief pitchers. We're talking about
one and done
guys came up for a cup of coffee and is gone. So can easily be replaced. Whereas Bruce, back they didn't let those guys pitch too long, and he had only less than 7% of his were the guys who were less than 0 WAR.
Anybody else? Do you have a question?
Can you share that with us? That slideshow?
Huh?
Yeah, if you I'll send it out. I'll send it to
You gonna put that in shooting star, Chris?
I can do whatever you guys want to do.
Okay. Scott had already talked to you about.
Look out to continue. There's a lot of trucks.
Well, the video,
Yes.
The video will be uploaded on YouTube, so you can see it again there. So, you know.
It might be a fun presentation to make at the SABR convention, Chris.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, we're good. Well, I'm gonna buy you a ticket.
That's right. All right, everyone. Don't forget, we have a trivia contest. Don't leave. But if you do want to leave, do not forget next month, March 20th, Mike Acosta, Gerald Sanchez. You will get Space Cowboys all night long. All right, that feel for the Space Cowboys season. And some of the other stuff that Gerald and Mike are doing. It's great when Mike Acosta shows up. And Gerald talked to us twice last year, I believe, a little bit, maybe twice, Mike, for the Space Cowboys game or something.
Yes,
Like
once, yeah.
Yeah. So Gerald has a really good broadcasting career. So
One more real quick comment about Caminiti that many folks don't know is when Biggio was inducted into the Hall of Fame, he took Caminiti's wife and children with him to the induction ceremonies. And Ken Caminiti is buried on Craig Biggio's ranch.
Goodness. This is why you should never miss a SABR meeting. This time. Dan, did you know that, Dan? No. Thanks, Bob. Thank you, Bob. Okay, since the great Hal Smith had to leave today, I assume to go pick up
His son,
Randy, who I'm trying to get to come as a guest. You know, but hey, whatever. Mike is going to give us the trivia contest.
right?
So, and again, the winner gets a copy of the Caminiti book. And Dan has said he would autograph it for you personally. So try your best. Team, if the team wins, I don't know what you're going to do about the book. Share.
So we had a good close of the meeting. We had a presentation about Caminiti. We had a film about Caminiti. Then we talked about home runs, and now we have a. So as I told Lynn, it's easy as ABC. So all you have to do is name, for the most part, the career leader by letter for each letter in the alphabet. I stole this. Somebody did it on RBIs about 9 years. Thought it was a good idea. Not counting my. And this is a team event. Consult the person next to you.
How's the trade from you?
And there are two sides. I learned how to print on the back on my computer.
Secondly,
Yeah. Oh. Well, I tried to print out. Everybody else just want to see it. Who else is? Can you put them up? I don't guess you can.
Not if you don't have a, well, yes, I think I can.
They'll transition from home runs to home run.
Let me see if I can take a picture of it and then send the picture up.
so that would be Ben.
Can do all kinds of.
Anyone need a copy?
You gonna read the questions to the people online?
Give me 1 second. We're gonna try to send it to my head.
Yeah, but you just want to go over it.
Okay.
Y'all want to hear them? You want me to read them out? All right. Okay. A, B, C. C. What player whose last name begins with an A is second to Hank Aaron? Because that one was too easy. And there they are. Chris got them
I'm
up.
gonna get them, hold on a second, I'll get shared screen.
He's gonna share it with you.
Sorry about the picture quality, but it was the last thing.
We did the same thing with Barry Bonds, who's second. And just for fun, what place is Ken Caminiti in with 239?
Yeah, I don't know anything. Well, that's what it's good. Give us a silly next time. On the basis, but when was the next year we made? Not what it was.
And I gave a hint for the F home run leader. It's not Aaron Fudge. The character from Bill Brown's first novel. Didn't write an answer sheet.
This was all the time, so then I do narrows.
Oh, there's a back too.
There was more in the back.
I go all the way to the positions.
I was wondering about that. Let me see what I can do about that.
Oh. Well. Might be last. That's very much that's all. What you think you do? Did you finish? You actually had the wrong question. All right, put it down and we'll start answering. Anybody have any questions about something they can't understand?
I don't know. I know.
Thank y'all. Genius. That's as easy as that. They should just keep putting.
All right, there you go. Right. Second question.
Good job.
I
don't know how you find them.
What do I do for a living? Look for stuff.
Yeah, what do you do for this?
Engineers, sign highways. That usually it's expansion of ways now.
So that's yeah, either there. Sales. So they quick first companion engineer. They do. They do a lot of robotics.
Really? Wow.
That's it. Well, 6 sales. When it's a big account, he has to meet with the chairman of the board of that company, the third biggest company. That's what they do. Probably that discreet. That's what can you do? Can I get you another drink, sir? You're right. Everybody finished? All right, let's go over them and got that. Really slow. Not as good. Where you at? I got B. Yeah. Not B. B. All right. All right. All right. Hank Aaron was too easy. So, who is second to in the A category to Hank Aaron with 351 homers? That's a good guess, but it's not right. I didn't even think of him. And Moisey Lou was a good guess. Answer's Dick Allen. Wow. All right. After Barry Bonds, who's second? The letter B. Who said Banks? That's correct. Mr. Boudreaux. He knows his B's. All right. All-time home run leader with the last name beginning with C. No, he had 300 and something. Miguel Cabrera is correct. 507 and climbing with a bullet. I think he's going to play again. Ken Caminiti is in what place with 239? 329. I think he's tied. I think he's tied for 239. Interesting though, he's tied with Dolph Camilli.
Yeah.
Which is spelled very similar to Caminiti.
Dolph's grandson was childhood friends with Ken. They grew up a block away from each other.
Look at that.
Yeah. Both National League MVPs with the same home run. Wow.
What a world we live in. Love these statistics. Who is the leading D home run hitter? No, DiMaggio had 351. Because he missed a bunch of years. Yeah. And talk about Hall of Fame skips. This is Carlos Delgado with 473. And I did a small presentation once. I didn't do it right, comparing his stats to Bagwell's. Except for the batting average, they're super close. Not saying that Bagwell, but Delgado got kicked out. Was it first 5 years, or he didn't get enough the first vote? And that guy was a force for like 18, 19 years. Somebody should do something. We'll report on him. E. What is? Good guess. All right. He's second. White Evans is second. Now, Darrell Evans is second. So Darrell is right. Darrell, yeah.
First name, just the left.
Yeah. That's right. Darrell batted left-handed, White batted right-handed. Edwin and Narcion.
Wow.
And the F leader, who is not Aaron Fudge. Jimmy Fox is correct. How about G?
Hank Greenberg.
Ken Griffey Jr.
There you go.
Griffey
had 600 something. Gary got what, 496? Greenberg, he didn't hit 500. I'm not sure what he is. I love this H. They're tied. So if you can name either one of them's last name, you get credit.
Frank Howard.
Frank Howard is correct.
Florida State.
No, Ryan Howard.
Ah,
That's funny. The H had 382.
Who is the I with 305?
Well, obvious.
Very good. Man,
Wow. The brain
way to
over
go, Lynn. You did cheat a little bit. You got one.
And so I have juice one.
And J is who you think it is.
It's not
Reggie. Reggie, yeah, that's right. Y'all see him on Sunday on those broadcasts they had for the softball thing? He was giving away Reggie bars. I can't remember the name of the tournament, but they had a he was good. He was on with who's our Astro announcer? They had it on TV all weekend.
That's House.
Yeah, Callis. Had Michael Bourne on with them. They were doing it was pretty good. Astros are trying to, well, anyway. Who's the leader for K?
Lazuski.
Killebrew is correct. Followed by Dave Kingman, Bill Konerko, and Al Kaler. Former Astro holds his L spot, but Longoria is still playing, so he can catch him. Not that far behind.
Jeffrey Leonard.
No, not sure. Longoria is behind Derek Lee with 331. And Carlos Lee with 358. All right. And M is a Hall of Fame letter. Mays is on top. Who's next? And I wrote this. Now,
McCovey.
McGuire was 660.
That
No,
don't
Mays
count.
had 660.
He's on the Hall of Fame.
But listen to who is. I got McGuire, Mantle, McCovey, Eddie Matthews, Stan Musial, Fred McGriff, Murphy, Maris. I mean, a lot of you. They didn't even mention me. Former third baseman has the N lead. Very good. Craig Nettles for the Yankees and Braves. Oh,
Big Pop. Sajahara.
well, technically that's correct. This is MLB quiz. So, it's David Ortiz, 541. Been a lot for a long time. Do I hear a P? Who votes?
Rafael Palmeiro.
Palmeiro second. Who votes? Yeah. Who else? How many did he wind up with? Did he make 700? Well, yeah. Palmeiro's about 640. Then it was Piazza, then somebody I can't read, then Parker and Boog Powell. All right, Q 154.
Frank Quillisi.
No, he had 3. He was second.
Jamie Quirk.
That's not Carlos.
Quintana.
Quintana, that's right. All right, R. So hopefully nobody didn't get any. Left that one in there. S. Sammy Sosa, 609. Schmidt at 548. T. Jim Tomey, 612. I'm not used to these 600 numbers. You.
Dan Ugly. Wander Eager.
Ugly, no.
Ulander.
Ulander, yeah, that's my name. I was gonna think Ulander.
Justin Ulander.
No, Tim Ulander. Another weak hitting 70s.
Chase Utley was second with 259 and Justin Upton 324.
Seven. Right last name.
So who's B?
Bobon.
Who?
Bobon.
No.
Greg Vaughn. Oh, Mo Vaughn. That's a good guess, but it's not right. That was a good guess.
Forget the Mo then. Vaughn.
What?
Forget the Mo, whatever. Vaughn.
Vaughn is correct. Greg Vaughn.
Greg Vaughn.
Who's 4 ahead of Joey Votto. 355 to 351. W.
W's not.
What?
You skipped W.
You don't have W on that.
You have Caminiti there.
Well, town proofread. Right, I did. It's on my answers.
State.
Dead weight, yeah.
Oh,
Well, left it off.
yeah, heavy again.
X.
Nobody.
For the X.
There's never been an X.
There has not been a major league player named X. There was a Cuban player who played in Negro leagues, but I can't even remember his name.
There was a minor leaguer a few years ago that X, but he never made it.
How about Y? Yes, it's correct.
Michael Young.
Yes, 452 and Rudy York was second, 277. And then Z. That's just easy for you to say. Oh, Zist? No.
That's Zobrist. Zobrist.
No. No.
One Zest.
No. He's not even on the list.
He's asking. Zobos or soccer?
Around there, maybe. Well, Todd Zeal was second, but the leader is Ryan Zimmer.
Ryan Zimmerman.
4. Then Mike Zanino is 31 years old, so he's got a shot. So that's it.
Very nice.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Remember, this is for a autographed book, the author. Even though he told me he was out of books. Because oh, he's
So you're welcome.
So don't count them up. See who wins.
Oh, I'm not Brian. I'm participating.
Oh, okay. Well, how many got one? How many got 5? Whoa. 7. We got 2 people left? 3, 4, 8, 9, 10, 11.
Cow.
11, yeah. You got 10? What do you mean, got 10? What? I got 10. 10, you got 11?
Yeah, but I already bought a book, so. So it's for William. You got me up. How we got? Thank you all, everybody.
Good job.
Yeah. March 20th will be our next meeting. Also, Bob McCann wanted me to ask if anybody in this room is interested in joining the chapter Fantasy Baseball League. If you are, email me or Bob McCann, and I'll send out some information. So the chapter's thinking about doing fantasy baseball, so you know, whatever.
What league? It's gonna be ESPN or?
I don't know. Bob
Yes.
got finger handling this.
Yes, it's ESPN.
So yeah, probably ESPN. All right. Thank you all again, everybody. See you next month.
Thank you.